Padre Pio often emphasized that the moment of death is not just the end of earthly life, it is the doorway through which the soul carries its final state of mind. In one of his profound mystical experiences, he described a vision in which he saw what happens to a person who dies with uncontrolled anger burning inside them. The vision did not begin with fire or punishment. It began with a silence so heavy that it seemed to swallow all sound. In that silence, he saw a soul appear shaken, tense, and disoriented, as if waking up from a violent storm. What struck Padre Pio most was that this soul was still angry. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, but truly emotionally consumed by the same fury the person felt at the instant of death. The emotion had not faded. Instead, it had intensified because there was nothing physical, no body, no breath, no distractions to dilute it. The anger was now the soul's entire atmosphere. The soul trembled, pacing in confusion, unable to calm itself. It replayed the last moments of life over and over, every hurt, every argument, every word spoken in rage. Padre Pio explained that at the moment of death, a soul's final emotion becomes like an imprint, a lens through which it first perceives the afterlife. And for those who die in anger, the afterlife begins with a storm of their own creation. He realized that this suffering was not God striking the soul, but rather the soul being trapped within its own unhealed emotion. The anger, which seemed small on earth, became a vast shadow in eternity, isolating the soul from peace. This was only the beginning of what Padre Pio saw, a painful reminder that the condition of our heart at death deeply shapes what follows next. Padre Pio's vision continued as he watched the soul struggle, trapped in the very emotion it refused to let go of in life. He described anger not as a passing feeling, but as a chain that tightens around the soul the moment earthly life ends. On earth, anger can be suppressed, hidden, or softened by distraction. But in the spiritual state, where all emotions are magnified and all illusions are stripped away, anger becomes a powerful force that overwhelms the soul. In this vision, Padre Pio saw that the soul could not escape its own fury. Every thought fed the fire. Every memory sharpened the pain. The anger did not simply remain, it grew, expanding like a storm cloud that covered everything the soul tried to see. It became a prison made not of walls, but of emotion, a prison built from resentment, grudges, and unresolved conflicts. What's striking is that the soul was not angry at others anymore. Instead, it had turned its fury inward, angry at itself for dying that way, angry at the choices it made, angry at the sudden clarity that came too late. Padre Pio observed that the soul's suffering came from a painful realization. Anger had robbed it of peace in life and was now robbing it of peace in eternity. There was no external punishment, no divine wrath, only the soul's own emotional state acting as its tormentor. Padre Pio noted that God's justice is not always about inflicting pain. Sometimes it is about allowing the soul to fully see the consequences of its choices. And for this soul, that meant seeing how anger had consumed it for years, shaping its decisions, hardening its heart, and finally sealing its fate. The soul's greatest suffering was the truth. It had carried anger to the very threshold of death, and now anger carried it into eternity. Padre Pio described the moment of death as a time when the soul should open itself to God's mercy like a final window still left unshut. But for the soul consumed by anger, that window was sealed from within. Instead of calling out to God, instead of asking for forgiveness, the soul clung to its bitterness as though it were its identity. In Padre Pio's vision, the transition from life to eternity happened instantly, yet the spiritual consequences unfolded slowly, painfully. The soul, still burning with unresolved rage, could not look toward the light that appeared at the moment of death. Instead, it turned away not because God rejected the soul, but because the soul rejected peace. Padre Pio emphasized something striking. God's mercy was present, fully offered, but the soul's anger made it impossible to receive. As the light of divine love drew near, the soul felt exposed. The purity of that light revealed every harsh word, every resentment, every moment it had allowed anger to dominate. Instead of relief, the soul felt shame and confusion. It recoiled, as if the very thing meant to heal it had become unbearable. Padre Pio said that this is the tragedy of dying in anger, not that God refuses mercy, but that the soul feels too hardened to accept it. The soul was pulled into a state where time does not exist, yet awareness intensifies. It relived the arguments, the grudges, the wounds it never forgave. Each memory returned not as an accusation from God, but as a truth the soul finally could not escape. And in that truth, it saw how anger had become its master. Padre Pio said the moment of death is a doorway. For some, it opens into peace. For those who die in anger, the doorway opens, but their own hearts refuse to walk through it. Padre Pio explained that souls who die in anger do not enter eternal darkness immediately, nor are they abandoned. Instead, many pass into a state of purification, a place where God's justice and mercy meet. But for these souls, the purification is uniquely painful because the very anger they carried in life becomes the fire that purifies them. In his vision, Padre Pio saw such a soul surrounded not by flames of punishment, but by the burning memories of its own rage. Every moment of fury, every harsh word, every resentment it refused to release, each returned like a spark igniting the soul from within. This was not cruelty from God, but the soul finally experiencing the true weight of its choices. The anger it once justified now felt unbearable. The soul was not tortured by demons. It was purified by truth. Padre Pio described how the light of God's presence softened nothing not because God was harsh, but because divine truth reveals everything exactly as it is. In that light, the soul recognized the relationships it destroyed, the peace it rejected, and the love it pushed away. The realization struck like fire, clearer and sharper than anything felt on earth. And yet, Padre Pio noted something deeply hopeful. Every moment of this purification had purpose. The soul was not hopeless. The fire was not final. Instead, each burn was a step toward healing, a slow melting of the hardened heart. As anger dissolved, something unexpected began to awaken: humility. The soul slowly understood that its pain was not God's vengeance, but God's justice working to cleanse what could not enter heaven. The fire of purification is painful because anger resists surrender. But as Padre Pio said, the moment the soul lets go even a little, the fire dims and mercy begins its work. From this vision, Padre Pio understood a profound spiritual truth. Anger at the moment of death is far more dangerous than people realize. Not because God is eager to condemn, but because anger closes the heart to grace at the very moment when grace is needed most. Padre Pio often said that a soul filled with rage becomes spiritually heavy, unable to rise toward the light. It clings to its wounds, its pride, its sense of injustice, and in doing so, it delays the mercy waiting for it. He realized that the greatest tragedy is not anger itself, but what anger prevents: reconciliation, humility, forgiveness, and peace. When a person dies in anger, all the unresolved emotions, grudges, and hostility they carried become the very obstacles they must face in the afterlife. And yet, Padre Pio emphasized that no soul is ever beyond hope. Even the angriest soul can be saved, but the journey becomes longer, deeper, and more painful because healing must begin where hardness once ruled. Padre Pio shared this vision not to frighten, but to awaken hearts. He wanted people to understand that anger is not just a human emotion, it is a spiritual poison when nourished and left unhealed. The final lesson he taught was simple yet powerful. Do not wait until death to release your anger. Let go now, forgive now, soften now. so that when your soul stands before God, it rises freely, not burdened by fire.